The cover page of One Piece Chapter 1100, Thank You Bonnie, features Sanji cooking vegetables, which makes Usopp nostalgic about the Usopp pirates. It's been so long since he's seen them that he still pictures them as younger kids. In the past, Admiral Kizaru was visiting Egghead Island on a bit of business. Funny enough, he didn't like the cold very much and mentioned how different it was from Punk Hazard, which we all know eventually became half a frozen tundra. Dr. Vegapunk assured him that the future would be born in this new base of operations. His brain was practically overflowing with ideas. It was honestly hard for him to think straight. Kizaru figured that this was why the doctor hadn't noticed the world government's hidden surveillance. Borsalino scolded the old man for not checking every corner of the place when he moved in. Vegapunk could only sigh. The world government was not happy to see that he was making secret agreements with pirates. Overhead, a world government snail observed them. Dr. Vegapunk had no defense. He had been figured out. That being said, he wasn't happy about his friend's behavior at all. But Kizaru couldn't help it. He was just doing his job. Yeah, that's what they all say. A bunch of other Marines were on the island too, including a younger ex-Drake. A nice little cameo, but he's not really relevant right now. Kuma was in the room, and so was Saint Saturn's Den Den Mushi. The Elder made it clear to the doctor that Kuma being the perfect candidate for his cyborg experiments was irrelevant. Kuma was a pirate with a 296 million berry bounty. Congratulations to Bonnie for surpassing her father down the line with a 320 million berry bounty. It made no difference whether it was due to the doctor's ignorance or a simple lack of care. Turning a known fugitive into the face of their clone program was unacceptable. It would tarnish the reputation of the Marines. Due to this, the Elder had 3 extra stipulations that would be required for their deal to be accepted. First off, Kuma would become one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Just days before, they lost a member due to the actions of a pirate rookie named Ace. This managed to cause quite a bit of trouble in the pirate world. Someone as strong as Kuma would be a great replacement. The second condition required that he be made into a human weapon for the Marines. Kuma questioned if Saint Saturn was talking about modifying his body. The Elder confirmed this. Kuma was already worthy of becoming a warlord. With enhancements, he had become an even greater symbol of fear to all pirates far and wide. Kizaru agreed that the Navy would love to have Kuma on their side. Dr. Vegapunk angrily told the light user to shut up. Saint Saturn continued to say that Kuma wasn't like other pirates. They were very aware of his history with the Revolutionary Army. If he accepts their offer, they will need to take extra measures to ensure that his power is never used against them again. And this was the general basis for the final condition. The Elder's face grew dark. Kuma would need to give up his free will and sense of individuality. The idea of this was so ridiculous that Dr. Vegapunk raised his voice towards one of the world's true rulers. Doing something like that would be no different from killing the man. He was certain that this was because none of the other warlords truly followed their orders to the letter. Vegapunk did not relent. He claimed that if you remove all the humanity left in a cyborg, you end up with nothing but a robot. He refused to murder someone. Saint Saturn reminded Vegapunk of his position. He is a military scientist and has no right to talk back. Callously, Saint Saturn made it clear that these conditions would need to be followed if Kuma wanted to save his daughter. Kuma held his hand over his face as his mouth slouched. The Elder believed that this was a small price to pay, considering how expensive and difficult the procedure would be. He had absolutely no obligation to help Bonnie. And oh man, I am really looking forward to celebrating this man's downfall with you guys. Hopefully that'll come soon and be major for the end of the Egghead arc. Dr. Vegapunk continued to protest, calling this murder. To modify a human like that was just wrong. He kept refusing, but Kuma interrupted him, asking the doctor to do it. Kuma kept shaking with his hand over his face. He had been worried for so long. He thought it might not be possible to save Bonnie. Dr. Vegapunk could not believe his eyes. Kuma was crying, tears of joy. He wasn't worried about himself at all. He was grateful and would happily accept any fate if it meant Bonnie would be cured. Oh my goodness, Oda really created an angel and made him walk through every layer of hell. It's hardly a competition, but Kuma is no doubt the best father in One Piece. Tears welled up in Vegapunk's eyes. Borsalino lowered his hat a bit, and Saturn's Den Den Mushi remained stoic. Elsewhere, Bonnie was running around the lab, playing with Sentomaru. Saint Saturn wanted to know how long it would take Dr. Vegapunk to complete Kuma's modifications and cure his daughter. In Bonnie's case, curing sapphire scales would take about 6 months, but it would also take another year on top of that before she could be exposed to natural light. So it would be a year and a half before she's all better. Meanwhile, Kuma's modifications would take 2 years at least. Kuma was so relieved. Bonnie truly would be better by the time she's 10 years old. But since Bonnie was their only leverage here, Saint Saturn wanted a bit more insurance. Kuma made it clear that he had no plans to run away. But even still, Saint Saturn insisted that the world government would need to take Bonnie into custody once her treatment is over. She would be released only after Kuma's personality was totally erased. This made Vegapunk raise his voice yet again, as in that case, Kuma would not be able to see Bonnie after she's cured. The Grand Celestial saw no issue with that. Kuma's modifications were to begin immediately. It would be an ongoing process as he performs his duties as a warlord. After Bonnie is cured, contact between them would be forbidden to ensure that they don't escape. If there was any semblance of defiance from any of them, Saint Saturn promised that Bonnie would spend the rest of her life as a slave. And this was obviously the worst fate Kuma could ever imagine for someone he cares about. He swore to the Celestial that he would not ever try to see her. Kuma only had one request. He didn't want Bonnie to know the truth, not about her illness or the fact that she was being kept hostage. He didn't want her to wake up from her treatment in some awful government facility. He requested that they take her back to her home in the Sorbet Kingdom and keep her in the church where she grew up. If they could accept this, then he would never look for her and would obey without question. Saint Saturn paused for a moment. Then he agreed. The location didn't really matter so long as the world government would be overseeing it all. Saint Saturn was sure that the next 2 years would be interesting. Now, this guy is total scum, no doubt about it. But hopefully the 5 elders don't decide to super violate Kuma with those orders. Making him go collect slaves for the Celestial Dragons without question would be really messed up. Returning to his daughter after such a harrowing yet hopeful meeting, Kuma told her that they would be staying on Egghead Island for the next 6 months. Bonnie was excited to learn that her father would be staying with her. Kuma's excuse was that he might have come down with something too, so they needed to run a few tests. Simply being with her father was enough to make Bonnie happy. She also introduced Sentomaru to him as, quote, this weirdo, which the big man was not too fond of. Bonnie quickly noticed that there were so many windowless rooms in the lab, therefore giving her more freedom to move around than ever before. Vegapunk confirmed this, but also told her to be careful since there were tons of dangerous gadgets all over the place. But with all that handled, Dr. Vegapunk got to work. He could create the weapon of his dreams now, which is funny coming from someone who so adamantly refuses to kill. As he furiously wrote, Vegapunk struggled to slow down his brainwaves. He wished that there was someone who could write down everything he's thinking. He wished that they would be able to eat and use the bathroom for him too, so he would never have to stop. He was getting annoyed by how short-handed he was, and yet another revolutionary breakthrough came to mind. Flames erupted from the sheer passion and friction of his swift penmanship. Dr. Vegapunk had a lot of work ahead of him. This made the doctor wish that there were 5 more of him. Obviously, these desires led to the creation of the Vegapunk satellites, but there are actually 6 more of him, not 5. I wonder if that distinction holds any importance. Kuma received his modifications, and Bonnie received her treatment. Bonnie got along well with Sentomaru and everyone else. Their closeness explains why Sentomaru defended her with his life despite already being so heavily injured later on. Bonnie also drew an adorable picture of her dad. Dr. Vegapunk seemed to have started working on green blood for his satellites with his devil fruit as the base. Kuma and Bonnie happily spent as much time together as they possibly could. When cargo ships arrived with supplies, Kuma helped with the heavy lifting while everyone relaxed. Bonnie was in love with all the food. Vegapunk, Sentomaru, Kuma, Bonnie, and Kizaru all enjoyed a massive pizza together. They were all really happy as they did so. And afterwards, Kuma and Bonnie had everyone in the lab doing the Nika Shuffle. Even the Admiral of the Marines was dancing to the drums of liberation. That's the second biggest shocker of this chapter. But eventually, those wonderful 6 months came to an end. Taking a look at Bonnie, Dr. Vegapunk was able to confirm that the procedures were a success. After a year of rehabilitation, the little girl would be completely cured. Kuma was very thankful, and so was Bonnie. She wondered if she'd be able to come and visit Egghead Island when she's all better. Vegapunk happily said yes. Too bad the circumstances of her return have turned out to be so grim. After that, Winnie the Pooh and Piglet returned to the Sorbet Kingdom. Everyone was excited to see them again after so long. Bonnie proudly told them that she would be all better in a year. Then she would finally be able to go outside. All the old folks were overjoyed to hear the outstanding news. Bonnie did always say that she'd be cured by the time she turns 10 years old. An old woman entered the church, wondering if this meant she'd be taking care of Bonnie again. It was Granny Connie. or more specifically, Queen Dowager Connie of the Sorbet royal family. They would happily take care of the girl and assured Kuma that he could count on them. The new warlord thanked them. He pointed to the fact that he's a pirate, so sticking around would not be good for the kingdom. He lifted Bonnie and said that he didn't expect to be back for at least a year. Bonnie was shocked by how long he'd be gone for, but Kuma promised to write her a bunch of letters. Bonnie accepted this, mostly because by the time they see each other again, they would be able to travel together like they always planned to. The idea of that brightened up her smile and only added to her anticipation. Kuma smiled back, expressing that he would love to take her. That part was true, but wasn't a possibility anymore. Just then, 3 Cypherpole agents disguised as medical professionals entered the church and told Kuma to leave the rest to them. The woman leading them was a CP8 agent named Alpha. She looks a lot like Khalifa. Maybe they're sisters or something. Alpha claimed to be a nurse that had been ordered to take care of Bonnie during her recovery. She would be checking the child's temperature daily, making sure she takes her medicine, and look out for any changes. She introduced herself to Bonnie, but even the kid could feel that something was off. No suspicious people would be allowed near Bonnie during this time. Anyone who planned on visiting would need to bring proper identification. Along with that, they were also building some hefty accommodations outside the church. Alpha pulled something out in front of Kuma. She crushed it to remind him how fragile the life of a child can be. Kuma understood. He would not be returning. Kuma placed a hand on Bonnie's head and thanked her. With a smile on his face, he told her that he's really glad she was born. This embarrassed Bonnie a bit, but she was happy to hear it. Then they all cheerfully bid him farewell. Meanwhile, the pirates of the world were totally shocked. It was quite a surprise to learn that Bartholomew Kuma, the infamous Pirate King, had now become a totally obedient member of the 7 warlords. Sugar approached Doflamingo with the paper while telling him that there was a new warlord. Joker was intrigued by the prospect of yet another villain joining their ranks. And it is always nice to see Doflamingo again. Robin asked Crocodile for his thoughts, but the Sandman could not care less. Instead, he was more interested in knowing if she had taken care of the people who saw their rain-making ship. Mihawk remained solemn as he read the paper. Alvida mentioned that the guy looked as big as Whitebeard. She then asked Kobe who he believed to be stronger, her or Kuma. Meekly, the kid claimed Alvida to be the clear answer. As Whitebeard, Marco, Jinbei, and Blackbeard discussed the news, Ace mentions to the Fishman how good it was that they had finally found a replacement. But seeing as Ace was the reason for the vacancy in the first place, Jinbei didn't really expect him to say that sort of thing. The Whale Shark Man was still reading the details. He noticed that Kuma was formerly a king. Between him and the current king of Dressrosa, it was clear to him that the pirate world was changing quite a bit. Boa Hancock, like Crocodile, was not interested at all. Must be a reptile motif thing. She refused to follow any man's orders. Not that that was really the subject, but Gloriosa insisted that the princess keep track of such vital information. Moria laughed in bed as Perona and her hollows floated above. Kuma was said to be a paw-palm man, which didn't sound very scary to the monster lover. But considering he was able to become a warlord so quickly, Perona was sure that he must be strong. Dragon frowned at the news. He knew his kind friend all too well. Sabo and Koala were in disbelief. The warlords answered directly to the world government. There was no way Kuma would do that. Kuma's ship now had an adorable Jolly Roger based on Bonnie's drawings as it fled from a large explosion. He wrote to his daughter that he was still at sea. Due to his reputation, it was getting harder and harder to sail in peace, but he was doing fine. He was trying his best to find interesting places for Bonnie to travel to when she turns 10. Knowing that the journey was a long one, he kindly hoped for the delivery bird's safety. Kuma prayed that everyone back on Sorbet was doing as well as he was. Afterwards, Kuma had just received new commands from the world government. He was in the East Blue and was about to dock in Foosha Village, the hometown of Luffy, who was still there without his brothers. At this point, the most significant person there should be Luffy. If the 5 elders know the truth about the Gomu Gomu no Mi, then an interest in its user would only be natural. And even if that's not the reason, Luffy is also Monkey D. Dragon's son. Luffy didn't recognize the pacifista or the real Kuma when they met on Sabaody. But we have to remember that Kuma's powers can remove metaphysical things like memories. Kuma's connection and reverence for Joy Boy is immense. Although Luffy is far from Gear 5 at this particular point, he still has the Warrior of Liberation's power. The two of them meeting could also explain why Luffy thinks giant robots are so cool, along with why Kuma seems to be so considerate towards Luffy and his crew. Things just keep getting more and more interesting. Hopefully you guys will stick around for more. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.